to the Dharma Journey podcast, Bonnie Bliss.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I love the name. Is the Bliss your real name or?
It's real in that it's the name I use. I have an official name I was born with, which is way too long and no one can pronounce it, so I just use this one.
I feel very pleasured today because my previous client before you is also called Bonnie, so I've got two Bonnies today, which is
Wow, that's amazing. I went to a party last year where there were three Bonnies in the same room. There were only five women there, and three of them were called Bonnie, and it just blew my mind. It felt like some weird, portal had opened in the universe or something.
yeah, I know. No one ever is called Briar. I think I definitely have a bit of a strange hippie name, thanks to my.
You're the first person I met called Briar.
Am I? Yeah, it's a weird.
Yeah.
Apparently, in America, there's an ice cream store called Briar's Ice Cream.
Yeah, right.
But that's the only Briar that I know, and I think Sleeping Beauty is called Briar Rose.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I'm so stoked to have you on the Dharma journey. Um, Bonnie is a somatic sexologist, and she's trauma informed pleasure educator, specializing in women's pelvises. Is that right?
Yes, that's
Yes.
right.
I always think I love interviewing people when they have like these length titles, and I'm like, I hope I have one of those one day.
You do have one of those. It's just you have to put the words after your name.
Yeah, I love it. And today we're going to talk about really, you know, I love we just spoke before about the Dharma journey. A lot of us expect that there's the big destination, and obviously we're going to be talking a bit about self pleasure, about orgasms, about all things kind of related to receiving pleasure. And I asked Bonnie about orgasms. She's like, yeah, it's not really just about the angle, which I love, is because like growing up, we're told that it's the destination, and really it's the journey through all areas of our life, through our growth, through our pleasure, through our orgasms, and I really believe it's like the becoming in the process is where we learn so much about ourselves. So I would love to learn about your kind of Yoni Dharma journey and enlighten the guests that are listening a bit about your journey, and then we can talk about other things as well.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, there's a lot of layers, but I think the essence of it is that, I'm Australian and I grew up in the bush. And I lived a little bit outside of society in some ways. Like we didn't have electricity or TV growing up, and I wasn't quite as susceptible to all the advertising and things that other people were exposed to. But I had a lot of insecurities as a child. I was bullied at school. I had a lot going on in my family that kind of caused me to want to like numb out and avoid my body or myself. And I had really, really low self-esteem for many, many years. So I was quite a late bloomer when it came to sexuality. As a teenager, used to play with an electric toothbrush, and that was like my very good friend for many years. It started with a bicycle on the farm, and then I kind of graduated to an electric toothbrush. And that's what I thought pleasure was for years. And when I started to relate intimately with other people, and I didn't feel much pleasure, I thought that my body was broken. I thought, well, sex is about orgasm. What's wrong with me? Why can't I experience that? I don't feel anything. I was having sex because I wanted to feel wanted. I wanted to feel validated, or I was really drunk, or I kind of had internalized this belief that sex was something that I should do for men. And if someone wants to have sex with me, then I should have sex with them. And sex is about someone else's pleasure, not mine, because I'm unworthy and I don't, I'm not good enough. And therefore I need to just give pleasure to other people. That was kind of what I thought in my late teens and early 20s, exploring my sexuality for the first time. And I'd kind of decided that pleasure wasn't possible for me. And I remember like each time I'd kind of start dating someone new in my 20s, I'd say like, oh, don't even worry about my pleasure. It's not going to happen. Like, it's just not possible. Don't worry. I'm one of those people that doesn't orgasm with a partner. Don't even bother. Like it's fine. Sex is fine. I still enjoy it. It's nice. But like, don't even bother trying because it's absolutely not happening. So that was really where I was at for years until I moved to Copenhagen, and I received my first ever yoni massage, went to a practitioner and received internal work. And it blew my mind. And it's a little bit controversial to say, because I don't necessarily always recommend people see practitioners, and that's something we can talk about if it feels right, because there are a lot of dodgy practitioners out there, and I think ultimately we want to empower ourselves to relate with our own bodies. But for me, I was lucky enough to have a really good experience with a practitioner the first time, and it kind of helped me to realize what was possible and experience sensations in my body that I had no reference point for. I had no idea that that kind of pleasure existed or was possible, not just orgasm, but like whole body pleasure. And afterwards, I felt angry. I was actually pissed. I was like, hang on, why did I not know this? Why was I not told that this was possible? Like, why didn't I know that my body was capable of this kind of aliveness and pleasure and sensitivity and internal sensation that not only obviously like helped me to experience pleasure, but helped me to connect to myself. Like it for me, it brought about this really profound sense of wholeness and like reconnection to myself, and letting go of the shame or the numbing and the constant self-judgment and the really low self-esteem. It's not like that disappeared overnight, right? Like I still had those challenges, but it really was a turning point for me, and it helped me to realize that there's so much in my body that I wasn't aware of, and that wanted to be listened to. So that's, I guess, how it began.
Wow. And did you have like, did you wake up one morning and like, I want to be an expert in self pleasure and help women, on their pleasure journey? Or how did that kind of shift?
Well, I think that initial session made me realize like this is something I really want to know more about. I really want to understand this. And then I started doing a whole lot of training with like lots of different organizations and practitioners and therapists and teachers and modalities. For about 10 years, I did basically every vagina touching training that I could get my hands on, or hands in, as I like to say. And just kind of ended up working with it in many different ways. And I created a modality, yoni mapping therapy, that I trained a bunch of practitioners in. And many, many things happened. I spent a lot of years teaching retreats and workshops and lots of in-person things. I've done a lot of private sessions over the years, but these days my focus is on working with women who want to learn, empower themselves to connect with their bodies in lots of different ways in their daily life. And so obviously with COVID, it's all become online. And I've been running a 3-month program called Yoni Club. That is my baby. We've had about 1,200 women join in the last few years. And that's my favorite thing, because I get to teach women tools to use in their daily lives, in their bodies, on a regular basis. And that's really what this, expanding our pleasure potential is about. It needs to actually make sense in our lives.
And do you feel like, is there an average of like, of what's normal for, I guess, self pleasure, whether it be ourselves or in our intimate relationships? Do you know like any statistics about, how many people are self pleasuring, whether it be intimately with someone or even just, on our own?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of statistics, and I think sometimes they're a bit complicated. It's hard to know exactly what's going on. But one statistic that I think is really interesting is that 20% of people who are in intimate relationships don't ever have sex. So they're in sexless relationships. And I know that libido stuff is a big challenge that comes up with women who I work with sometimes. And I've been in relationships before where like things have just felt a bit not comfortable sexually, and then we just start avoiding sex, and then before you know it, it's been a month, and then a month can turn into 2 months, and then and I can see how this happens with people over time, where suddenly it's been 6 months, then you haven't had sex, or you just really disconnected from a partner. But in terms of self-pleasure, I have worked a lot with women one-on-one. That's kind of my history, just working privately with women, and I've asked every single woman I've worked with, I've asked her about how she pleasures herself, how she relates with her body, and very specific details, things that you wouldn't normally talk about, right? But as a pleasure educator and a somatic sexologist, I get to ask those questions. So I say things like, tell me how you pleasure yourself, right? What position are you in? Are you lying down? What are you using? Do you use a thing? Do you put it inside you? Where do you touch on your body? What does that feel like? When you have an orgasm, how do you feel afterwards? And what I've discovered from, those couple of thousand women I've asked that question one-on-one is that most women would self-pleasure by just stimulating the clitoris.
Yeah.
There's a big focus on like, just get to the clit, make the orgasm happen, do the thing, be done with it, have that release, but like one and done, get it done. And what I know from my journey with like very clitoral focused self-pleasure is that sometimes it can feel draining or exhausting or like a bit of a letdown, after that kind of very tension-based clitoral orgasm. And the problem is that when we only focus on the clitoris for pleasure, we miss out on so much internal sensitivity and aliveness and pleasure that's available to us. So yeah, those are some little statistics for you.
That's amazing. Yeah, I always notice when I self pleasure, and if I'm just focusing on the clitoris, it's like that naughty feeling of like, oh, I think that rush and excitement is ultimately what that desire that we have. But then it's also like it's kind of like, oh, was that it? Like it's a bit of a
Let
bit
down.
spike, but then it's like sugar. It's like a big spike, and then it's like a.
Yeah.
I reckon so many women can relate, and I think also being working with women and about self love and self care and in different fields, but similar as well. I feel that there's a feeling of shame and guilt around our self pleasure and about our our ability to receive pleasure. Do you see that as women? I mean, I know, just women I know that I work with is like there's this big like they haven't got the capacity yet, or they don't feel confident enough to receive the pleasure. Do you see that a lot with women you work with?
Definitely. And I relate to it from my own experience as well. That feeling of like, oh, can I fully receive this? Do I get to just relax and receive this pleasure? Or, is it really okay to make sounds? Or can I fully embrace my sexuality? Or, can I really like let go into this? And I think part of that is, the shame and the guilt that we've been raised with. I think some people who may have been raised with really strong religious ideas about sexuality, the idea that our bodies are sinful or bad or wrong, or self-pleasure is wrong, that can obviously impact us. But even just growing up in a culture where we see sexuality as, something that looks a certain way, right? Like we see advertising that women look a certain way and we think, oh, that's sexy and I need to look like that to be sexy. And sexy is the women you see in porn, or sexy is this kind of lingerie, or, we have all these ideas and this aesthetic of what sexy is, but ultimately being connected to our sexuality is something that we feel that comes from inside. It's nothing really to do with how we look. Obviously, we can play with how we look as a manifestation of that, but there are people who might look incredibly sexy and highly sexual and amazing, but who may also be completely disconnected from their pleasure and their sexuality. So I think there's a lot of conditioning that we receive in our culture that really blocks us, and that can really contribute to that shame and that guilt, or that fear of pleasure. And there are lots of different ways to work with that, but I think the thing that I'm really focused on these days more than anything is creating a relationship with our bodies for ourselves, with our pleasure for ourselves, with our sexual selves, not in relation to someone else. Even if you're in a relationship that obviously you want to explore with a partner, but that doesn't replace a relationship with your own body and your own sexuality. And in fact, when you're really connected to your own sexual self and your pleasure, you can bring a lot into a relationship, whether it's a future relationship or someone you're currently intimate with. I think it brings a lot to a relationship.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to ask you, I don't know if felt this, like the more that you've awakened this sexual capacity to receive pleasure through your own ability. Has that in correlation tapped into your creativity? Because I mean, in yoga, we have this chakra system, and the second chakra is Swadhisthana, which is like this energy center, you know, in the body. That when when we remove those blockages through clearing, physically, emotionally, spiritually, like trauma and stagnation, like we do in Ayurveda, and I'm sure in your self-care pleasure practices, etc. Um, have you noticed yourself and other women really tap into that capacity to create, not just life, but like you said, birthing your Yoni Club, that kind of stuff?
Yes, totally. Yeah, because I think sexuality is one of the things that we most repress. You know, it's the thing culturally that we most repress, deny, avoid, shame, kind of put it in a box, pretend it's not there, or we do kind of embrace it, but just like briefly for little moments, and then we put it back in the box. And when we do that, when we're kind of denying a part of ourselves on a regular basis, it takes a lot of energy to kind of keep that in the box, you know, to avoid it and to repress it. And when that's kind of liberated, and that doesn't mean that we're like walking around the street having orgasms or whatever, right? But when we just
Not yet.
feel more right, but when we just feel like more free and content in ourselves as sexual beings, and we're not putting a lot of energy into like, oh God, what do they think, and am I doing it right, and how do I blah blah, then we just are connected to that, and it feels good. And then that allows a lot more energy for creativity, but also like sexual energy is creative energy, right? Obviously it's how we're all born. And when we kind of free that energy in ourselves, it does open us up to create more. Like the times that I have felt most creative have been the times that I've felt most alive in my body. And that hasn't always been channeled in the direction of sexual intimacy. Sometimes my sexual energy gets really channeled into creating and projects and things like that, but they also kind of support each other. Yeah.
And do you feel like you can give yourself a better orgasm than with a partner?
Good question. I they're different. They're very different. So a big part of my work now, and something that I'm super obsessed with, is the pleasure that we can access in our daily life, right? So there's obviously a lot of what I teach is like internal pelvic stimulation techniques to release pelvic tension and restore sensitivity to areas of numbness and open to pleasure internally in different areas. And I'm so into that. But what I'm realizing more and more is that when I'm connected with my body and my pleasure all through my day, then that supports, that orgasmic energy that can be so, so nourishing, like even more nourishing than actually a lot of the sex I've had in my life, And so I've had orgasmic experiences from just engaging with my senses through my day, from, looking at the wind in the trees or looking at the ocean or feeling my feet in the sand. I've had orgasmic experiences from just like moving my body a little bit or touching myself very, very gently that have had nothing to do with genitals, that experiences that I hold really close to my heart, experiences that felt really meaningful and like that helped me remember who I am. What did you say?
Like it's more nourishing, like deeply.
Yeah, really deeply nourishing. But having said that, like as a heterosexual woman, I am super into cock. I think there's nothing quite like that feeling of someone who I really care about inside my body, penetrating me to the depth of me. That's absolutely nothing like it. And I think that there's a lot we can do with wands, and the wand work that I teach is a bit different to, obviously it's quite different to a penis, because it's like a curved kind of glass wand that you put inside, and you can actually massage different areas of the pelvis to release physical tension, and then can increase the sensitivity you feel during sex with a partner. So it kind of supports each other. It's not like one's better than the other, they're just different. But absolutely very into the kind of orgasms that come from penetrative sex. And I think part of that is because I'm so obsessed with the cervix.
Yes.
So the cervix is the one of the most innervated parts of the pelvis. There's a lot of nerve pathways there, and it has a massive capacity for pleasure and orgasm that for a lot of women just isn't really awakened. We haven't really explored it that much, and it's not really talked about that much, but it's an area that I'm obsessed with, and it's something that I've explored a lot in partnered sex, and it's like changed my life in so many ways.
And because I love the fact that you say about like the, you know, you're really now so connected to your orgasmic bliss energy, you know, not just internally but in externally, like waking up, seeing a sunrise, or you know, the simplicity in life is orgasmic, and I think that's such a high vibrational state that we want to, you know, embody, you know, every day. But obviously we're not always in that state, you know, from time to time. And I know a lot of women, you know, that I've worked with, obviously you work with it, have experienced some form of like trauma, whether it be physically, emotionally, you know, sexually, whatever. How does that show up in our, maybe in our pelvis, or in our self pleasure, or lack of self pleasure, shall I say? Is there women that you work with that, you know, different kind of ways that you can notice that there's some form of blockage there, that women can kind of, okay, maybe that's me, you know?
Yes, definitely. So uh, maybe let's first of all talk about kind of what trauma can come from, because I think that often when we think about sexual trauma, we think about rape or abuse or like something quite intense happening.
Yeah.
But for me personally, I haven't been through that, but I've had a lot of sex when it really wasn't right for my body, or you know, like I said before, I've had a lot of sex when I didn't really want to, or when I felt pressured into it, or when I was really drunk. And all of those situations, I was kind of overriding my boundaries and overriding what was right for my body, which created a pattern in my nervous system that made me feel unsafe related to sexuality. And that's something that a lot of women that I work with experience. And what's really, first of all, I guess there are ways you can kind of know that there might be something to look at. And some of those could be if you find yourself avoiding sex generally in a relationship. If you find yourself, and there are many reasons for that, right? But that could be one reason. If you find yourself avoiding sexuality, if you find yourself avoiding self-pleasure, if you feel really disconnected from your lower body, if you feel really numb, if you feel like, oh, sex just isn't important, I'm not into it, if you feel fear around sexuality, if you've ever felt shame around sexuality, or you know, just really generally avoidant of that whole part of your life, that can be an indication sometimes that there's something that's potentially happened in the past that's led you to feel unsafe related to that. And I think that many of us will have had experiences that contributed to that. So what's important when we have those kind of responses, it's really to find safety in the body. So I've been to a lot of tantra workshops, and I've you know, done a lot of retreats and things where I've kind of felt pressured into like, we're all going to get naked and do this big intense thing, and it's all going to, and sometimes it's amazing, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes it's really overriding and not what your body needs, and then we can kind of feel even more unsafe, or even less comfortable in our bodies. So we need to find ways to feel safe. And that's a big part of what I'm doing with Yoni Club, my 3-month program. We have a trauma-informed practitioner and specialist who's there to support people, and who gives all these really specific nervous system tools all the way through the program, so that we can start to find safety in our bodies, as we also really gently explore our sexuality, our relationship to our vulva and our vagina and our internal pelvic space and our pleasure generally, because that safety is more important than anything. We need to know that when we start to connect with our sexuality, that it's okay, that we're safe, that it's comfortable, that we can feel relaxed and spacious. And that's what helps us to kind of open into deeper experiences of pleasure and orgasm. Like, people come to me wanting to have more pleasure or have better orgasms, but it's like, if you feel unsafe in your body with your sexuality, you need to work with that, finding that safety first of all, before you can, you know, open into really deep states of pleasure.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I just noticed ages ago, and you know, when if you ever seen a dog and it's being chased, you know, its pelvis will tilt and the tail will go underneath, and that's, you know, it's protecting its vital organs like the reproduction.
Right.
It's the same with
Yeah.
us as women and as, you know, men. It's like we you know, we're in that fight or flight, you know, mode, and that's why I love this somatic kind of area of experience. It's like we cannot heal if our nervous system is in this like sympathetic state, and that's a big part of like the work that I do as well with like yoga,
Mm.
bringing our body and our mind. And I think it's just funny that you say about that safety part, because since I've been in my own relationship with my partner, it's probably the safest relationship that I've felt in, and I've definitely experienced the most the more the you know the more deepest orgasms, I think. And I feel they're a lot more nourishing because I do feel safe, you know.
It's that
But
trust, right?
trust, but maybe but previous relationships, it was like like you said, I was just like thinking of the destination, whereas now you can kind of slowly enjoy the process. And do you find, I mean, I don't know, this is my more personal experience, because I feel so safe, I can also orgasm quite quickly. Do you feel that that's with women, that you, when you feel more safe, you can reach orgasm more quickly, even necessarily you don't want to, but it just happens because
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. I mean, our body's open when we feel safe, you
yeah.
know, and um, having said that, I think if we're really, sometimes we can have these really habitual patterns of just getting to an orgasm really quickly. Like I know that if I want to have a clitoral orgasm, I can just like on my clitoris and,
Yeah.
you know, with a vibrator or with my hand or, you know, with a partner,
Or a
and
shower
I
head,
can
I love
have,
that
or
one.
a shower head, exactly, all the things, and I can have a quick orgasm, but that orgasm doesn't necessarily help me to connect with myself, or it can feel sometimes draining or exhausting. Of course, we can have clitoral orgasms that feel uplifting or energizing as well. But yeah, I think that it's yeah, there's many different, I mean, in order to have a cervical orgasm or like deeper internal orgasms, they do often take a bit more time, even with a partner who you trust. It's like, you know, we need a longer kind of warm up, and we need, you know, more stimulation over a period of time to open to those much deeper internal experiences of pleasure.
And would you say that, obviously I know like orgasm isn't the goal, but for women that have never maybe experienced an orgasm, or they don't know that there are different types of orgasms, maybe you could share from your perspective the different areas using my dog's butthole. She's whining, she wants to go out. The different areas or the different yeah, different orgasms that you can experience, all that bliss kind of
Mm.
state, which I think a lot of us are, you know, we're humans, we love pleasure, you know. Um,
Yeah.
it's not a bad thing, you know.
No, not at all. No, pleasure's amazing. So let's talk first about peak orgasms. So we've spoken about clitoral orgasms, and there's the kind of clitoral orgasm, what we've been talking about is the kind of clitoral orgasm where there's a build up and there's a big intense moment and there's a big release, and it's very tension based, right? And so that kind of orgasm will leave you often feeling a bit drained or flat or exhausted afterwards. But you can also have clitoral orgasms that actually feel energizing, where you don't feel drained, you feel like connected and energized and open, you know? So that's another type of clitoral orgasm. Then we can have what's called blended orgasms. So that's usually involving some part of the clitoris, because as we know, the clitoris isn't just on the outside, it also goes a little bit inside the vagina. So stimulation with a toy or a penis or a dildo will also be stimulating the clitoris if it's,
Yeah.
you know, coming into the entrance. So there can be blended orgasms that relate to a few different areas. We can have orgasms on the G spot, and they are also a little bit related to the clitoris, but they will feel different because it's stimulating, you know, a different part of the body.
Yeah.
And then there's the A spot. So the A spot stands for anterior fornix, and that's a spot on the upper wall above the G spot and a bit deeper. And we can have orgasmic experiences there. The cervix, which I mentioned before, which is my favorite spot. So that cervical orgasms are pretty amazing. Oops. Cervical orgasms are pretty amazing. Oh, hang on a second. No, empty water bottle. Um,
Getting
Cervical
excited, all these
orgasms.
orgasms.
I know. Cervical orgasms are amazing because they are connected to the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve is one of the most powerful nerves in the body. It's very related to the whole nervous system and, you know, our parasympathetic nervous system that supports us to, you know, be emotionally resilient and ground in our bodies and just be more functional, connected humans. So when we stimulate the cervix and have orgasmic experiences there, it can feel like a very, very deep experience in a way that, you know, feels for me very different to any other kind of orgasm. Like it feels like it can often feel like it's a very whole body experience, or it starts in the cervix and then it really expands. But yeah, so those are some of the genital orgasms we can have.
What about
But
in the bum hole?
yes, so there's a lot of nerve endings around the anus as well, and we can, yeah, definitely have orgasmic experiences from stimulating that area. But we can also have orgasms from stimulating the breasts or the nipples or, you know, like kissing, right? There's a lot of nerve endings on the lips that can be super sensitive, but we can sensitize our body. A big part of my work is where we work with the whole body to use touch and movement to sensitize the whole body for pleasure. And something that has come up for me around that is being able to have orgasmic experiences from my hand being touched, or from a lover like stroking my butt cheek, or, you know, just like something really, really simple, like just touching my belly, you know, that it's been surprising to have like peak orgasms from these parts of my body that have nothing to do with my genitals, but it really is possible. And it's just about sensitizing ourselves and releasing those patterns of numbness over time. And then we start to open to pleasure in other places. So if people say that they, you know, you can't experience pleasure, you can only have this type of pleasure, or you can't experience these orgasms, my personal belief and, you know, kind of my direct experience working with thousands of women over the last decade is that there are areas that we can sensitize to experience more pleasure and more orgasmic states if we put energy into it, right? It's obviously not something that happens instantly. It takes a bit of, you know, letting go of old stories about pleasure and making a new pathway and focusing on it, but it's pretty rewarding.
Yeah, I know from, I mean, I haven't experienced like the touch from my arm orgasm yet, but I know friends of mine that, you know, have kind of delved into a bit more tantric practices and using breath work to cultivate, you know, kundalini energy and all that kind of stuff. And I have experienced a little bit myself, and knowing that there are infinite ways to experience pleasure, and not just through the genitals or through using breath, or, you know, just feeling safe and other practices, I realize there's a whole realm that I don't know about, that, you know, I'm going to be joining your Yoni Club soon, and I can learn more, because yeah, I
Yay.
feel that there's so much juiciness, and in Ayurveda we call it ojas. It's just like this essence of vitality, and for women that is replenished through deep fulfilling orgasms. I know for men it can be more depleting if they're ejaculating, but for women it can be very energizing if we're doing it in the, you know, in the right way. But yeah, I would love to know a little bit more maybe about your Yoni Club. Like how does that work? Like who's it for, and what does it involve? I'd love to know a bit more about that for the listeners as well, because I know it's yeah, open for a couple more days, I think.
Yes, just a couple more days and then we close. Yeah. So, Yoni Club is a 3-month program that I've been running for nearly 3 years now. And we've had over 1,200 women join us so far, which is amazing. And it's created this pretty big kind of worldwide community, which really blows my mind in a lot of ways. But it's a training in sexual wellness, holistic pleasure, and feminine embodiment. So, we're coming from this really gentle, trauma-informed perspective. We go into how we relate with our bodies, how we relate with our pleasure and our sensual selves and our sexual selves. And then slowly over time, we move into more kind of sexual specific practices where you learn about how to relate with your vulva in different ways, how to do internal pelvic work and use a wand internally to massage different areas and to release tension and numbness and yeah, just open to more like aliveness and sensitivity and pleasure internally, and to have different kinds of orgasmic experiences. But also there's a whole lot of incredible guest teachers in Yoni Club. So my kind of focus with this, I'm not interested in being like the one expert who knows all the things. You know, I don't think that exists. I don't think that's real. I want to say, well, look, I know these things. I'm all about pleasure and sexuality and relating with our bodies and touch and pelvic stuff. But when it comes to our bodies and our pleasure and our sexuality, there are so many other layers, you know? And so I brought in all of these other guest teachers. I have Gigi Grace, who does the trauma-informed work. I have Marcella Widrig, who teaches a workshop about working with shame and how to release shame from the body. She also teaches an amazing workshop about working with boundaries and getting clearer in our boundaries. There's an amazing sex coach, Ida Lucy, who teaches a workshop about sexual communication in the bedroom. There's a Tamika Wilder teaches a workshop about sex and motherhood for the mothers out there. There are just all kinds of incredible guest teachers who have offered their wisdom, and all these different workshops that are all part of Yoni Club as well. So when you join, you get all of my content, but also all of the guest teachers. And the way that it's structured is that you can do it at your own pace. So once you join, you have lifetime access to the content. It's all yours. It never goes away. You pay once. It's actually stupidly cheap for what it is. And, you know, I just want to make it really available to women who want it, especially at this time, because I know a lot of people are in lockdown or isolation. And, you know, I think this work is more important than ever because it really does support our stress levels and our nervous systems. But there's also quite a lot of support during the course. So for that 3-month period, there are regular live calls, there are study groups, there's a Facebook community for that group. And then after that 3-month period, you go into the larger group with all of the Yoni Club students from the last few years. And a lot of the women choose to create these little pod groups as well, where they like make a little group of 6 or 8 and they support each other through the course. So it's yeah, so it's amazing because then you find people in your time zone and you do a little thing together every couple of weeks and share how you're going. And yeah, so it's this whole community in many ways, which is really beautiful. And there's, yeah, that extra support for the 3 months, but the lifetime access to the course and all of the content.
And I read as well, which is amazing, is I'm really, it's kind of what I'm wanting to build as well, is that community aspect that I feel like so many people are wanting, especially in the female like empowerment and, you know, working online, and the fact that you offer like payment plans and scholarships, and like you said, I think it's like what, 500 US, so it's a really
Yeah.
amazing price for like everything you get, which I was reading today. I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like I want to do it.
Yeah.
So it's really amazing that you offer that for so many women. Yeah, and I would love to maybe ask you, like, what are there any tips, any self care pleasure tips, not just necessarily for, you know, the vagina, but anything that you think will benefit women to just really connect into their body and to find, you know, bliss, orgasmic bliss in everyday life, not just, you know, in a genital area.
Yeah. I mean, my absolute favorite pleasure tip that I feel like everything stems from, like if I could give you one tip that would, you know, have the most impact, it would be to be curious. Because for years I was not curious at all, right? I was very numb and very disconnected from my body and just not looking for anything else, just thinking like nothing else is possible. This is just my life. And I think the way that we live sometimes, you know, sitting down so much, being on screens a lot of the way that our culture is set up is really training us not to be curious. But when we do open into that curiosity in our relationship with the world, with our senses, with other people, with our bodies, with our pleasure, with our orgasm, with what's possible when we start to like relate with our bodies, you know, instead of seeing our bodies as a problem to be fixed, as like, right, well, I've got this sexual issue, so I need to do this course and then I'm going to work it out and I'm going to fix my problem. Like, no, like I'm a sexual being. I was raised in a culture where there's a whole lot of weirdness around sexuality. So sometimes it's a bit challenging. That's normal. How can I create a relationship with this part of me that might be really nourishing and inspiring? And I think curiosity is the key to that. It's something that we can bring into so many moments through our day, into our intimate relating, into our self-pleasure, that I think can only bring good fruits.
I love that. And what do you recommend as well if people or women have partners that are not as curious or open to this kind of exploration of self pleasure and of multi-layer orgasms and all the things that come with, intimacy, not just orgasms? But what would you say if a woman, wants to find more intimacy with their partner? Would you say that they need to start first with themselves and then have, hopefully that has a ripple effect? Or
Yeah, I mean, I think really that is the case, really starting if your partner's not interested in that, just starting with your relationship with yourself. I think it all starts from there. And from there, you get clarity around, oh, right, I'm really longing for this type of intimacy, or I'd love to be met in this kind of way by a partner. And then you can kind of initiate that conversation and, suggest different things and explore together. But I think something that is really overlooked with sexual intimacy, we often think if we're not happy with the intimacy we're experiencing, we often think, right, well, I've got to talk to my partner and we've got to say, like, I'm not happy with the sex and how do we make it better and what are we going to do about it? And I think sometimes it's necessary. And I think communication is really important about sexual intimacy. I think it's great to have conversations about what's working, what's not working, what your desires are, what you both want to experience. But there is also something to be said for what happens in the bedroom, right? Like showing your partner, show your partner your body opening when you feel pleasure, when you feel expansion. Show your partner your body closing when it doesn't feel good. Don't fake your orgasms, don't perform, don't like make more sounds to make your partner feel better if you're really not enjoying it, because you might realize that, oh, I'm absolutely sending my partner the wrong messages about what I'm enjoying. So show them through your body what you enjoy, what feels good, and also give them an experience in their body. So you can sensitize a partner's body by touching them in lots of different ways. You could say, hey, let's play a game. How about you lie down and for the next 15 minutes, I'm just going to touch your body and you tell me what feels good and what you want more of, and then you just give their whole body lots of touch and let them really melt into that. So you can offer a partner these really simple experiences that help them to connect in a way that's not like, we've got problems with our sex life and we need to fix these things, in a way that's like fun and exciting.
yeah, no, I love that. I think it's great. And there's this quote like there's a link between like our orgasm and how much we can surrender to ourselves in everyday life, not
Mm.
just in the bedroom. So I think that really, it's hit for me because I'm like, oh, okay, sometimes we're just so focus, like I said, on the end goal that we get caught up in that, and we don't surrender to the moment and really just allow ourselves to be and have no expectation. Like me and my partner love it now. Like some days we both don't orgasm in, but we just enjoyed like the moment of intimacy, and it's like, we don't need to always have that end goal, but when it does happen in the moment, it's incredible. And just having that, that awareness of what you need and what they need, and really cultivating that in your relationship.
Exactly. And not expecting that it's just magically supposed to be amazing. Like sex is not supposed to be like that. It's like it's not necessarily natural because we learn all of this stuff that's incorrect, so we need to unlearn that and find new ways. And it can feel a bit awkward or messy or clunky, and that's all part of it. And that can be fun as well.
Yeah, I love that. And like you said, it's just and also just making, the fun parts of life are really like laughing at times when it is a bit awkward and doesn't go to plan, or when you do a funny fart and it's really embarrassing and you
Exactly.
embrace it. But yeah, I think my partner's been away for a month now, so I'm really keen on him coming back, even though I have been definitely self-pleasuring. But I feel like that's the thing, we need to, we don't always have to put it on them. It's like we need to cultivate that self-pleasure within ourselves in everyday life. And so yeah, I've loved chatting to you, Bonnie, and connecting. And I'd love to ask, like, where can people find you? What's the best way to contact you? And I know you have some awesome stuff. Like you do a lot of free things, like the libido workshop that I'm signed up for. Um,
Yay.
and yeah, are there any other ways that the community can connect with you if they want to learn more about your work?
Yeah, for sure. So on Instagram, I'm at bonniebliss.co. My website is also bonniebliss.co, and on there you'll find links for Yoni Club and any free events and things that I have happening. Yoni Club closes on the 21st of January at 8 p.m. AEDT, Sydney, Melbourne time, I believe. So it's pretty tight timing. But if you would like to join us, using the code RECLAIM will get you $50 off the price. So we'd love for you to join us if you feel inspired. And I'm also answering people's DMs on Facebook or Instagram, because I know that joining a course about sexuality can be a bit vulnerable and people can kind of be like, oh, is this right for me? I'm not sure. So I'm really happy to answer your questions. If you reach out to me on Instagram or Facebook, I'll get back to you.
Amazing. And we'll post this next week, but we'll post like a little snippet so people can see on Instagram and stuff, so they'll have a bit more opportunity to connect in with you before the end closes. But obviously, you know, they can always join up in the next, you know, in the next 3 months. But hopefully, yeah, I really love to see your community grow, and I think it's so empowering that you're, you know, helping women find that pleasure and connection to themselves on a physical, emotional, mental level. And that's really, I guess, a part of your Dharma journey, which is amazing. So thank you so much for coming on and being a guest.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been a total joy.
Yeah, I'm sure in the future we'll definitely talk about more pleasure, orgasms, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, my dog is crying now. I think it definitely wants to go. So thank you for listening to the Dharma Journey, and we'll see you guys next week. And I'll put all of Bonnie's information in the show notes as well. Sending lots of love. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. We hope you enjoyed it. If you want to connect with us, my Instagram is @BriarRoots, @the Dharma Journey. Please feel free to send us your favorite episode, and we'd love to hear your feedback. If you want to reach and connect with me further, I offer weekly women circles every Sunday, also Ayurvedic healing programs, consultations. So all of my details are at the bottom. Thank you so much for listening. This is really a part of the Dharma Journey movement to bring us closer together, connection, community, collaboration, and really inspire one another on our path towards liberation. Thank you so much for listening. Have an incredible day. I hope.